Hello YouTube, welcome back to my channel. So the reason that I wanted to film today's video, which is going to be about how I prepped for an unmedicated birth, 2 unmedicated births in my case, is because a couple of reasons. One is actually to have for myself, because while I don't have any current plans to have a 3rd baby, you just never know for sure what the future is going to hold. So if we do choose to have another baby, it would be nice to have some things to look back on, because I kind of noticed there were some things that I forgot between my 1st and 2nd birth that I would have found helpful to remind myself of. And 2, also because I am passionate about the topic, and not because I don't consider it some sort of like gold medal thing or some like award that, or like bragging rights to say that I've had an unmedicated birth, as some people kind of think that that's how it's viewed. And you know, I can't speak for everyone, so I don't know that that's not how some people feel, but I know that's not how everyone feels, and that's not how I feel. Personally, it stemmed from the fact that growing up, I kind of always thought that children were in my future. And I was also terrified of needles. And, you know, when I was growing up, and I think even still now, a lot of what you hear around the topic of giving birth is it's painful. That's what people say. And so while I grew up thinking that, you know, children were going to be part of my future, I was also terrified. I wasn't afraid of needles in general, except for in my spine. It's like the one place that I'm just like, no, that terrifies me. And then, you know, to also hear like, you know, stories of things going wrong. And, you know, of course there, you know, when I educated myself more, like there are some risks associated with it. So it just further solidified the fact that I knew that I really did not want to have the epidural, and that I wanted to basically have the experience and feel what it was like to give birth without any medical intervention. But, you know, it can be hard when all that's talked about surrounding birth is the pain. So I felt like, especially after doing all the research and going through it myself, I've just become more passionate about wanting to help people be more aware that it's possible to give birth without medication if it is something that you want to do. Because I feel like, had I not even explored that option, or, you know, if I hadn't been terrified of a needle in my spine, it just would have been, I would have like accepted that like birth is just painful. That's part of life. It's what it is. And, you know, I hate the idea of that, you know, but I want to have kids. So I have to, you know, go through it somehow. So just, you know, I'm just going to have the epidural and that'll be that. And I wouldn't have even known to think about it in any other way. So while I don't think this is the only way to bring a baby into the world, because, you know, unfortunately life is unpredictable, so you can't control how it plays out, I do think that it's helpful to know going into it that you do have potential options. And so if it's something that you want, you don't just have to accept that giving birth is painful and it's not even within the realm of possibilities to do anything else other than get an epidural, and, you know, whatever comes with the possible fears that you know, some people might have about the epidurals is just something that you have to get over. But that's not what I wanted to do. So that's why I wanted to share my experience. And, you know, if it can help someone else, you know, feel more informed about making their decision, then that's why I'm doing it. So I will just start with the first thing on my list, because I think it was the most helpful. And for me, that was doing a hypnobirthing course. The one that I did was from the Positive Birth Company. They do a good job of explaining what is going on with your body when you're in labor and giving birth. And for me, if I can understand why something is happening inside my body, I feel like it takes some of like the unknown and like the mystery away, and therefore sort of helps me feel more calm about what's happening. And I can relax a little bit because I know that it's not something bad. And in fact, that's one of the things that they talk about, because if you don't understand and you get scared because it's not something that you're familiar with, it can increase your adrenaline levels, which therefore decreases your oxytocin, which is the feel-good hormone, and it kind of puts you in a state of fight or flight. And in doing so, takes the oxygen away from your uterine muscles and sends them to your extremities, because if you're in the fight or flight mode, then you want to be running because you're usually running away from danger. And that's not where you need your blood to be going. And the blood and the oxygen needs to be going to your uterus, because that's the area of your body that needs it at that time. Like, we don't need to be in fight or flight mode when we're in labor. And so when that happens and your uterus doesn't have the blood supply that it needs, it can become fatigued, and that's when it can be painful. And they go into a lot more detail. And if you don't get the course, you can even go to their YouTube channel, and they have some content on their YouTube channel that explains this, and even that is helpful. But I do highly recommend the course, and it covers everything from going completely unmedicated all the way to C-section. So, and really anyone can benefit from taking the course, which I really like. I think that's all I wanted to cover with that. Hey guys, future Sarah here. Sorry for the interruption, but as I was editing this video, I realized that there were some things that I forgot to mention that I find important. So I just wanted to come on here and add those things in really quick. The first thing was really just that if you only remember a short bit of this video, let it just be to try to remain as calm as you can, and really you will just cope so much better if you're able to stay as relaxed as possible. A good way to do that is to take advantage of the breaks that you have in between each contraction and let yourself basically come back down to ground zero, so to speak, and breathe, stay positive, lean on the support system that you have, take comfort in the fact that they're there. And don't forget that your body is not doing this to you. It would not try to harm you. It's doing it for you. And just in the end, however it unfolds, be it medicated, unmedicated, C-section, whatever, it's still you giving birth to your baby, and that's beautiful. And then the other thing that I wanted to just touch on quick is tearing, because I feel like that's a really common fear that people have. It was definitely one of mine, and it was a reason for a while that I thought that I might actually want to have the epidural. But in the end, one of the reasons that I felt pulled to actually not have one was because I wanted to know exactly when to push if I needed to, or when to hold back, as was the case with my second baby, because it all happened so fast, which I do talk a little bit about that in that birth story video, which I'll link below. But some people say that you can still feel the urge to push, or like you can still feel what's happening, and so you know when to push and when to hold back. Other people say you can't feel anything at all. I think it just depends on the person and how the drug works within their system and how it's administered and all that. So it was just a risk that in the end I didn't want to take, because if you can't feel it, that can sometimes increase the likeliness of tearing. You want to work with your body. Second and I can obviously only say this because of experience now that I've been through it, but I will say that it was the furthest thing from my mind when it was actually happening. There was just so much adrenaline running through my body, and I was so focused on what I was doing and the fact that I was so close to meeting my baby that it just, I wasn't even thinking about the fact that I might tear, and honestly, like, hardly felt it at all. Like, yes, it did sting, that's for sure, but it was nowhere near what I was expecting, and it was truly the least uncomfortable part of the whole experience. So now a tearing is the lowest reason on my list for wanting an epidural, but I just wanted to address that because it was definitely something that I thought about when I first started exploring my journey. So okay, that's probably not an exhaustive list, but I just don't want to make this video super long. So back to the original video. And then another thing that I did at the time, I didn't do it for my first birth, but I did for my second. And I wish I had done more of it, but my second birth, I had a kid, so I had less time to devote to it. But when I did it, it was called One Strong Mama, and now it's called the Body Ready Method. But it's a lot of exercises that you can do. Well, it supports the entire pregnancy and then also gets you ready for birth. So you can do it throughout your entire pregnancy. It's helpful to do it throughout your entire pregnancy, but even if you're towards the end and let's say like you didn't hear about it until the end, or you just didn't have time, it's still something that you can benefit from even if you're, just a few weeks away from giving birth. So in relation to that, another thing that I did was walking. For my first pregnancy, a lot of the months that I was pregnant were in the winter, so I wasn't able to get outside as much as I had been before pregnancy. I also ran very cold, and so getting outside in the winter just did not sound appealing, but I was able to do that a lot more in my second pregnancy, and I think it was hugely beneficial and just helped my body get ready to basically, they say it's the equivalent of running a marathon. So I think it helped keep me in shape. And it was also therapeutic and calming as well. So I can't say enough good things about walking. So another thing that I found helpful for preparing for an unmedicated birth was thinking about the atmosphere that I wanted to give birth in. And so that's not just about where I wanted to give birth, because that's obviously a factor too. If you want a home birth, a birth center, or a hospital birth. And I think that you should go with what is right for your, personal pregnancy. If you're a high risk pregnancy, then, obviously a hospital birth. If you're a low risk pregnancy and but you're still someone who finds comfort in being in a hospital, then, a hospital is probably the right choice for you. I think it's, a very personal decision when you choose where you want to give birth. And for me, it was actually going to be at a birth center, and it was just across the street from a hospital. So I felt safe in that sense that even if something were to arise and it was an emergency situation, we were close enough to a hospital that I felt comfortable not being directly in the hospital during the birth. And also I wanted a calm environment, and to me, I associate being around doctors as like there's something wrong and it needs fixing, and it's sometimes something that could potentially be dangerous. So that's just how, where my mind goes when I'm in the hospital. So I don't feel a sense of calm when I'm in the hospital, and that's what I wanted to avoid. But I just hadn't done very much research on a home birth at that point. So it was birth center that felt right for me. It didn't end up being that. And I, won't go into too much detail on here because I don't want to make this video too long, but I will link below my birth story for my first birth, and I explain there why it changed. But essentially, I was not able to birth at the birth center anymore. And so then it became a choice between hospital or home birth, and just really did not want a hospital birth if I didn't medically need a hospital birth. So ended up doing some research and coming to the decision that a home birth felt right to me. And I think, it ended up being a blessing in disguise that we weren't able to do a birth center birth, because I had, while a long and intense home birth the first time, it was very lovely, and I still talk about it as a positive experience. And so then, of course, that is exactly what we wanted for the second birth as well. And the second birth went even more beautifully. And so not just choosing, the location, but then also like how you want to your surroundings to be. And so for me, and I feel like a lot of people like this would resonate with them too, but I wanted calm. I wanted not a lot of people around, and dim lights, and either music or something calming playing in the background. At first, in like the early stages, we had like TV playing, but then once you really get into it, it's not really enough to distract you, so you're not really paying attention. So I ended up using the Freya app, which I can link below, but it's the Positive Birth Company's app, and there's positive affirmations that play, and it also tracks the contractions for you as well, so it serves as both. And yeah, I just kind of felt like it helped me to go into a more meditative place while that was playing. And then I also chose to labor in the tub both times, and that was just immensely helpful. I started out laboring in the shower both times. The first time was such a long labor that I was kind of in and out of the shower more often, but I was definitely in the shower for my second birth, leading up to getting in the tub. Like, water for me was just so calming, and being able to have it like run over my belly during a contraction, it's just the one thing that felt it just relaxed my muscles sometimes in ways that I felt like I couldn't achieve on my own. So that was just really nice. And yeah, just that, like both times stepping in the tub for both births, it was like I just sort of like melted into the water. But it's not like suddenly like you feel just fine. It takes the edge off so that you can kind of relax and feel like, okay, I can do this. Yeah. And then for my second birth, in between being in the shower and waiting for the tub to fill, because I couldn't have both because they needed the water source to be able to fill the tub, I had a heating pad, which was a lifesaver, because I was able to hold that on my low abdomen where I was feeling the contractions. So that was really helpful. And so another thing that I found really helpful in my second birth that I didn't do in my first, and I can't remember if it's because I hadn't heard about it yet or if it just never got to that point, but with the second birth, because my body knew what it was doing, like the first birth was so different, I had to push for my first birth. I don't think it always goes that way. So, a lot of people, their body just does it for them. And I'd heard stories of that and was sort of hoping that that was going to be the case, even though it sounded a little weird. But my body did not do that. But then with my second, my body just did everything for me. And because it knew what it was doing, and like everything, seemed to line up exactly the way it was supposed to, it was like everything was being done like on its own. And so it was a much more powerful birth experience. It went by a lot faster. And I think because of that, it was also more intense. And so some of those and I think I was also, because I was in the shower, I wasn't in the tub for some of those, and so I wasn't completely enveloped in the warm water. So I was really feeling it for some of them, and it was just, it all happened like so fast. So I definitely got like more in my own head a little bit, but I found it helpful sometimes during that time to remind myself, this is power, not pain. This is power, not pain. And I think that sort of grounded me a little bit to remind myself of that. So that was another thing that I used, and it was something that I knew going into it ahead of time to be able to refer to. So, okay, sorry about that. My phone unexpectedly died, so I had to plug it in, but I didn't have a cord that extended long enough, so I wasn't able to continue filming while it was charging, and by the time it had enough battery left to start filming anything again, we were going to be late for our dinner reservation. So it is another day, and I am just gonna pick up where I left off. And where I wanted to pick back up again was that another thing that really helped me was having a doula. We found one for the first birth, and I just connected really well with her, and she just felt like someone that I had known for a long time, and she was just really easy to talk to. So because it worked out so well with her the first time, we also went with her for the second birth. So we were able to be in touch with her from somewhere in the second trimester, and then throughout the rest of the pregnancy. And she also just was a good resource for, you know, things like packing a birth bag, which I will get to next in my list, and then just kind of like things to, you know, have prepped ahead of time for, like, you know, to be ready for once baby comes, and then, you know, different like exercises that I could do to help support my body. And then she came when I was in labor. Around the first birth, she got there before my midwife did, and a lot of it was because it was starting to get intense for me, but it was not to the point where the midwives should be there. So my doula came to help support me, and just to offer me like more coping mechanisms and that sort of stuff. So, and then in the second birth, because it went by like so fast, she actually got there just after my midwife did, but her offices are really close to where we live. So, you know, it makes sense that she got there first, and, you know, we can't control how quickly things happen. But in both cases, you know, she was just a very like calming presence to have. She was very encouraging, and just I feel like helped, you know, keep me grounded. Now, I think this is you know, can be more of a personal thing. If you don't want other people in the room, that's, you know, it's to each their own. But like for me, it just, you know, I wanted a knowledgeable resource to have nearby, and someone that felt like I had a connection with. So it was just very easygoing about having her around. And so I guess another thing that I have on here is gentle, soothing touch. And she did some of that, as well as my husband, but it was just kind of like on my shoulders and on my back, and just sort of like gently, you know, not like massaging and like, you know, a hard like pressure kind of way, but just sort of, you know, gently like stroking the back of like my shoulders and like kind of down my back, just to sort of help keep me feeling grounded and not anxious. And that's just something that for me personally helped. And then I guess I'll finish up with that too, that she was also like, she stayed until, you know, well after the birth. And then we also had a follow-up appointment after the birth where, you know, she comes and, you know, she can help answer questions and, you know, find out how things have been going. And it's just another, you know, familiar person to be able to chat with and make sure nothing gets missed. And, you know, she can help with, you know, making sure that I have the right support after giving birth, and that, you know, if there's like breastfeeding questions or ways that things that I can do to help make sure that I heal faster, just, you know, all that kind of stuff. So then going back to the other thing that I mentioned was the birth bag, and I called it a birth bag because I had a home birth in both cases, and even when it was going to be at a birth center, it just felt weird to call it a hospital bag. So, and I packed one even though it was a home birth because I felt, I mean, I went into it, you know, having packed one for the birth center birth when that was going to be the plan, because that actually did not change until I was about 36 weeks along. And of course, you know, that was not going to be at our home, so I needed to bring stuff with me. But even after, I was glad that I had it and still used it during my home birth. So then for my second home birth, I packed another one. And it was because even though I wasn't planning on having to go anywhere, one, it was nice to know that anything that I planned on needing, I could just know that it was all in one place and all in one bag. And then in the event that something had come up and we would have had to transfer to the hospital, then I also knew, because I packed in, you know, with that in mind, that was a potential, you know, not likely, but, you know, potential possibility. I put things in there that I would want if we were going to have to be transferred to a hospital. And that way I didn't even have to think about it. So if the plan did change, I could still just grab that same bag and we could go. So for instance, things that I was going to want to be, you know, using in my environment, whatever room of the house that I ended up in, or, you know, if I like moved rooms or something, having like the tea lights or something to help with just like the tone of the atmosphere and that sort of thing. So another thing was I made some hydrating drinks for myself when, like, that I drank some of it leading up to, you know, just kind of to stay hydrated, because obviously that's important in pregnancy. But when I knew that I was going into labor, because my water actually broke for my second birth, and I did this more so for my second birth than I did with my first. I tried really hard with my first, but I was also more nauseous with my first birth, so just not a whole lot. It was like my body just didn't want a lot of stuff, especially food. Like, it would tolerate a little bit of liquid, so I was taking tiny little sips as often as my body would let me. But yeah, when I was still feeling good in the beginning of the second birth, when I knew things were coming because my water had already broken, I made myself a big glass of a hydrating beverage that was vitamin water and like a electrolyte supplement packet. The brand that I used was Element, but I think that there's quite a few options out there. And then I think I also added some coconut water to it. Those were really helpful. Because your body is going through a lot when you're in labor, and it takes a lot out of you. So anything that you can do to help support, and especially in ways that are easier to keep down, because I know that with my first, for sure, I just did not want food. Like, I tried, I really did, but my body just would not let me eat food. It was the last thing that it wanted. I was sometimes nauseous, like it just did not want food. And then with my second, I think it was a little bit of that, but also more so like things just happened like so fast. So I was just like so much in the zone. So people were like, my doula and my husband were also offering me drinks because I wasn't going to remember to drink things. But that was another reason why I had so much beforehand, because I was still, it was still in the early stages. So I was coping just fine. And then the other thing that I did, more so with my second than with my first, but because this is a lesson that I learned, is that I made sure to go into it well rested. Because with my first birth, I happened to get, not a good night's sleep, which was weird for me. That was very rare in my first pregnancy. I slept so well. And then I just happened to have a really bad night's sleep. And I planned on catching up the night after. And that didn't happen because that night I started having my first real contractions. And while they weren't coming consistently, they were only coming every probably 45 minutes. When they would come, they were strong enough, especially when I was laying down, where it would wake me up. And so I couldn't be laying down when I was having a contraction. It would be so strong that it would wake me up, and then I would have to stand up immediately because it was just so uncomfortable to be laying down during them. So, being interrupted every 45 minutes with something that intense and unfamiliar, and you don't know, is it going to keep picking up? I didn't sleep well again. And then it just continued into the next day. And it was not good. So what I should have done was done my best to either take naps during the day, which I don't nap well, but if I had known that I wasn't going to be able to potentially sleep the next night, I would have found ways to make it happen. Even if not actually napping, but just laying down and resting and taking it easy, because any energy that you can reserve for what you're going to have to do is worth it. So, and then, I guess really just the last thing is something that I mention, because if we do for some reason end up having a third, this is something that I would want to remember and hopefully get help from my partner. So my husband, or, possibly even my doula as well. But I feel like it would be helpful for me to have a reminder that my second one went by so quickly. So, saying things like, okay, you've already been, doing this for an hour. So, the last one only took 2.5 hours. So, all you've got is another hour and a half, or maybe even less. And, then, okay, just another 45 minutes and baby will probably be here. And because even if that doesn't end up being the case and it takes longer, I would rather think in my head that there's less time than when there actually is. Because if I think that there's more, then I feel like I might just get into my own head too much. So I just wanted to mention that in case anyone else would be in a similar situation and think that might be helpful for them as well. So that is everything. So just to wrap this up, I really just want to reiterate that I am sharing this only because I want to contribute to changing the narrative that there's this expectation that birth has to equal pain, that it's meant to be painful and that's just the way it goes, and that you just have to accept it, even if you're simply too afraid to get the epidural, like how I felt when I first started thinking about having kids. And that it just means that you either have to suffer through the pain or put up with the pain. And I don't believe that has to be the case. I won't go so far as to say that it's not hard or, that it's not a lot of work. I was absolutely exhausted at some points, almost shaking, visibly shaking from how worn out my body was from the physical exertion that birth requires. But I believe that birth doesn't automatically have to equal pain. And it certainly can. Life is unpredictable. We can't control everything. But if we go into it thinking that it's going to be painful, then that's probably what it's going to feel like. But if we don't automatically think that, then maybe it won't be quite as scary as we thought. And truly, I always looked forward to my births, and the experiences did not disappoint. They were absolutely amazing and empowering. And I knew that regardless of the way that I brought them into the world, that it was meant to be and it would all be worth it. That old cliche really is true, that once the baby is out and safe in your arms, that all those exhausting efforts that you just went through are behind you, and all you can think about is your new precious baby in your arms. That's why I wanted to share this, because I just want people to know that there are options, and sometimes it's just nice to know that it doesn't have to be what I feel like so many of us grew up thinking that it would be. All right, well, that's going to be everything for today's video. So if there's anything that you did to help you prepare for your birth, or anything that you learned in your experiences that I didn't talk about, feel free to mention them in the comments below, because I want people to have access to as much information and resources as possible. And if you have any questions, also leave those below. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.